Nations across the globe struggle with how to cope with this new coronavirus reality. Like in the U.S., the U.K. is seeing the same type of panic buying at their stores. Now, DEFRA, the Department for Environment, Food and Rural Affairs over in the U.K., back in 2018, released a food system report, barely a page long, at least to the public, ensuring all was good and well. But experts say the U.K.'s food supply chain is at risk following Brexit, but now further complicated by this novel coronavirus. So joining us to discuss, former UK MP George Galloway. So George, we've heard lots about potential death tolls for those who fall ill from COVID-19, projections on transmission and what have you, but we've heard very little on this topic that could potentially be more catastrophic in the long run, and that is food insecurity. Right now, only about 53% of all food consumed in the UK is produced in the country. Nearly the other half comes from outside its borders. There was a lot of uncertainty about how the UK's food supply might be impacted after Brexit. But George, now we have this virus. How can the UK go back to being more self-reliant?
Well, all that is solid has melted into air in the teeth of this epidemic, this pandemic. Who knew that we didn't have face masks even for our doctors and nurses? Who knew that we might actually run out of food? Who knew that panic buying, which is essentially legalized looting, would leave the supermarket shelves absolutely bare from around 7 a.m., 8 a.m. in the morning. I've just been in 2 supermarkets for my own family's necessities. There's nothing to be found, Manila. People are descending like a horde of locusts on everything and taking away much more than they can possibly need. And a lot of food will be going to waste, rotting, because it can't possibly be eaten, the amount that it's been bought in. And then there's the issue you've just highlighted, that actually not just 50% nearly of all Britain's food comes from outside of the country, but when you talk about fruit and vegetables, it's 80 to 90% coming from outside the country. In this green and pleasant land where it never stops raining, turns out we can't even grow our own fruit and veg.
That is incredible, George. 80 to 90%. I couldn't imagine. I would have never guessed with the beautiful English countryside.
No, not me.
And we've heard President Trump rail about America's trade gap with China. We all know that. We know that it's imbalanced. The UK has its own food trade gap of about 22.3 billion pounds in the wrong direction, with 46.8 billion imported into the UK, but only 22.5 billion went out. So how does this food gap impact the economy overall for Britons?
Well, if you took whiskey out of that equation, the gap would be very much greater. It turns out that for things that you put in your mouth, whiskey is by far and away our biggest export, and that is extraordinary. Here we are, an island surrounded by fish, where the rain never stops, where our country is green from north to south, east to west, and yet we are unable even to feed ourselves, never mind think about selling our products elsewhere. Beef production, many people think that British beef is a mark of excellence, but not as many people are buying that as are buying Scotch whisky. So we need to recalibrate this, as so many things, once, if this coronavirus epidemic is ever over, because we are naked. We are at the mercy of blind forces over which we have no control. And that's not what Brexit was supposed to be about. So I'll be arguing for a very decisive shift to buying British, eating British, growing British, making British. That's what we have to do. Every country has to be secure in the basics within itself. Otherwise, they're at the mercy of things and of people that are entirely beyond our control.
That's right, George. COVID-19 has really laid bare the structural weaknesses in food supply chains, not only in your country, but across the globe. So what are your thoughts on Great Britain's logistics systems and how delivery is unable to meet demand currently?
Well, but for the truckers, of course, we'd all be dead. So the Teamsters and their British equivalent need to get organised and make sure that they're properly valued, because without trucks, we'd be nowhere. We've got to look at things afresh, I think, Manila. We eat too much. We eat too much of the wrong things. We don't eat enough of the right things. I've just been giving my own children a lecture on this today. We eat too much processed food. We don't eat enough of the things that we need, and we eat too much of the things that we don't. When this is over, I tell you, everything is on the table. Everything about our lives and the way we organize our society is on the table.
Absolutely, George. And lastly, we know that Boris Johnson is obviously busy trying to deal with this virus outbreak, but has there been any movement on the next steps for Brexit, or post-Brexit, I should say?
Well, everything is on ice so far as that's concerned. It's not officially been called off, but it seems inconceivable that there's much work going on between Britain and Brussels right now on what the final picture will look like. So it's probably not going to be done by the end of this year. But frankly, not much is going to be done by the end of this year. The whole political agenda has been turned upside down.
All right, we will leave it right there. As always, appreciate all of your insights. George Galloway, thank you, my friend.